Picasso once said that women are machines for suffering. The use of the word machine in this case implies that it is the woman herself who manufactures the suffering, who subjects either herself or others to it. Given his alleged treatment of artists and models such as Fernande Olivier, Dora Maar, and Marie-Therese Walter, among others, it would seem that what Picasso actually meant, subconsciously or not, is that women are machines with the purpose of being fed suffering. Specifically, his own. He kept Olivier locked up in his Paris apartment whenever he went out for errands, leaving her deprived of freedom yet convinced that she was satisfied. He had Maar and Walter literally wrestle each other over the prospect of remaining his one singular muse, though he would eventually replace them both, as he always would. He fed his mistresses and wives his brand of suffering. They gave him his art. And finally, he disposed of them when he found a newer, more appealing machine. There are two kinds of women, Picasso said: goddesses and doormats. Though it would appear that throughout his relationships with these supposed goddesses, he was actually tearing them down, piece by piece, until they eventually became his doormats.
Silent Hill F is the story of women as machines for suffering, of women as goddesses and doormats, and the men who tread upon them. It's the story of being shackled to the societal expectations of our assigned genders, our attempts to free ourselves of those expectations, and the risk of simply changing one pair of shackles for another. Silent Hill F takes us to 1960s Japan. Its subject matter is right here, right now, wherever you are. It's everywhere, all of the time. Oh, and the black screen is not a stylistic choice, I just forgot to shoot this part. One of the most common and insidious tools used by people who commit emotional abuse is blame. Specifically, the shifting of blame. It is, after all, less taxing to convince someone else that they are the problem than learning, accepting, and admitting the opposite. In Silent Hill F, the motif of blame is introduced as soon as the game starts. An alcoholic father scolds his daughter, protagonist Hinako Shimizu, for not listening to him, for not being more like her sister, not seeing that it's his own irresponsible behavior as a parent that has turned her ears off to his aggressive rantings. He then shifts the blame once more to his wife, claiming it's because of her spoiling their daughter that Hinako has grown up to be such a brat. The real issue is that Hinako's father went broke when his close friend and restaurant partner ran off with all their money, and now intends to pay off his debts by giving away Hinako's hand in marriage. Whoever her father used to be, he is now a man who views Hinako not as his daughter, but as an object to be traded away for his own benefit, as he has already done with her sister, Junko. Hinako leaves the house to find a friend to talk to at the local general store, in her fictional home village of Ebisugaoka. On her way, she passes the house of her old classmate, Sakuko, who for reasons initially unbeknownst to you, greets Hinako by calling her a traitor. This is also the last thing she says before leaving Hinako to meet up at the shop. Hinako was the first friend Sakuko ever had, and she quickly built a codependency on her. Sakuko's greatest fear, as it turns out, is being left alone, in the literal dark. So when Sakuko started feeling like Hinako was about to abandon her, like when Hinako's track and field obligations meant leaving Sakuko behind in PE class, Sakuko started building resentment towards Hinako herself, rather than the team's demands. As Hinako arrives at the general store, she's met by her closest childhood friend, Shu. Their conversation is awkward. Something is brewing that neither of them wish to address. Though after a while, Shu points out that it's unlike Hinako to just let things happen, but that he will be there for her regardless of what choice she makes. He hands her a box of pills, one of the recurring healing items found in the game, which are meant to help against the stress-induced headaches caused by her terrible living conditions. Or at least, that's what Shu would like her to believe. In one of the game's endings, he admits that the pills help you reflect within yourself, but that they are also extremely dangerous. Apparently, this was a price he was willing to pay for Hinako to, hopefully, reconsider agreeing to the planned marriage. They are then joined by Rinko, who is visibly upset by Hinako's presence, clearly expecting that she would be spending time with Shu alone. It does not take long for the story to reveal that Rinko is in fact in love with Shu, and that she blames Hinako for standing in the way of their inevitable romantic relationship. The fact that Shu hasn't reciprocated a single one of her advances is of no significance to Rinko, because, clearly, it's not because of her, or even Shu. It simply has to be Hinako's fault. Throughout the game, Rinko mocks her for acting and talking like a boy, and even tells herself and Shu that Hinako is dead, as if saying it enough times will change reality in her favor. As the classic Silent Hill fog sweeps through the streets of Ebisugaoka, Hinako is soon transported to the Dark Shrine, a spiritual realm inhabited by a man whom the game refers to as Fox Mask. This man displays a somewhat alarming level of affection for Hinako from the get-go, and he spends each of Hinako's subsequent visits to the Dark Shrine with molding her in his preferred image. He makes her drink from a shrine of mind-altering water. He has her back branded with a fire iron, her right arm cut off, and a piece of her face surgically removed. In return, she is granted a fox mask of her own, as well as a new, beast-like arm to tear her enemies to shreds. This is the man Hinako is supposed to marry, to whom she literally gives her hand. And what he is doing is called coercive control. He convinces Hinako that she must rely on him, and that all the suffering he's putting her through is for her, nay, their own good. Foxmask tells her she is a goddess, but aims to make her his doormat. Another way of enacting coercive control is by cutting a person off from their friends and family, which is another thing the Fox Mask requires of Hinako. While the game avoids explicitly divulging which parts are literal versus metaphorical, the player is nonetheless asked to kill all of Hinako's friends and parents in some of the most cold and ruthless displays of violence ever depicted in a Silent Hill game. Rinko has to be lowered into a boiling pool of lava, burning her alive. Sakuko must be left caged up in a pitch-black room while she screams her lungs out, and Shu's fate is to be hanged from a steel chain around his neck. All this happens while Hinako, now under the spell of the alluring fox mask, shows absolutely no remorse. In the third of the 5 possible endings, called The Fox Wets Its Tail, Hinako confronts the fox mask, who in turn regurgitates classic excuses like, "I did all of this for you!" and "Why don't you understand how I feel?" A last-ditch effort to reclaim the control over Hinako that he knows, deep down, he has already lost. That's just one outcome though, and it's arguably not even the best one for Hinako, since it concludes with her simply choosing Shu over the fox mask. Which partner would you prefer? The one that drugged you into submission, or the one who tried to? Hinako starts her journey leaving her home in an act of defiance, but in 3 out of the 5 endings, that defiance is futile. Her ascension to godhood grants her a power fantasy, but even with all that physical strength, she can't meaningfully fight those weaponizing their blame towards her. She can only succumb to them, one way or another. And with every new playthrough, you're forcing Hinako to face that blame in perpetuity. The world around Hinako starts hostile, even before the classic Silent Hill fog envelops the village. And it only gets worse from there. the player has to fend off a variety of enemies in both Ebisugaoka and the Dark Shrine. And since this is a Silent Hill game, there exists both implicit and explicit meaning behind the enemy's characteristics. The Ayakakashi are essentially the animate scarecrow versions of Hinako's friends, physical manifestations of the blame they've misguidedly put on her. Though the majority of the enemies more specifically reveal Hinako's relationship with her assigned gender, and the societal role it entails. The first enemy Hinako encounters, the Kashimashi, has her limbs sewn to joints both fleshy and mechanical, giving her the appearance of a human doll. The name is likely a reference to a Japanese proverb, which translates to, "When three women gather, it's noisy." As misogynistic as such a proverb may be, it is apt that such a creature exists to reflect Hinako's own internalized misogyny. Based on her personal journal entries, Hinako doesn't want to be like other girls. She's come to view girls the way patriarchs of her society do, as objects to be owned by men. As a result, women, or at least the female gender role, is threatening to Hinako. There are also these enemies, which I can only describe as the most pregnant fucking creatures I've ever seen, who depict women not just as machines for suffering, but factories for childbirth. Interestingly, they are the only enemies who put up physical barriers that Hinako can only cross after she defeats them. In other words, it represents such a strongly imprinted idea, so powerful with its presence, that Hinako has to kill it in order to proceed. The Oi Omoi, a creature made out of disassembled Hina dolls, instead represents a more deeply buried aspect of Hinako's relationship to her gender. Hina dolls are associated with a March 3rd celebration called Hina Matsuri, or Girl Day, and are made with the express purpose of protecting their young female owners. In Silent Hill F, the Oyomoi does the exact opposite. It uses its guttural scream to stun Hinako, leaving her open for other enemies to strike. The Oyomoi forces passivity onto Hinako, reducing her to the helpless, rule-abiding girl she might have been when she still kept a Hina doll of her own. Since the doll is so tied to tradition, it only makes sense that it would try to hurt Hinako for not abiding by traditional gender roles. Among the more male-coded enemies, we have the Ara Abare. Hinako comes across this creature several times throughout the game, but it's not until she has a boss fight with her own parents, and her father turns into one, that its symbolic purpose becomes crystal clear. This is the embodiment of male rage, specifically aimed towards women. In his Ara Abare form, Hinako's father couldn't care less that he's running straight through his wife on his warpath towards his daughter. What the fuck happened there? Hinako's father couldn't care less that he's running straight through his wife on his warpath towards his daughter. This creature uses its superior size and strength to grab, slam, and throw Hinako around the room. Nothing else matters to it. This is not what Hinako's father looks like. This might not be the exact kind of things he did to his daughters, but it is likely what his domestic abuse feels like to Hinako. He becomes a towering giant, and she a tool for him to channel his aggression through. This next enemy doesn't have an official name I could find at the time of writing, so I'm just gonna call it the worst boy who ever lived. This creature, this fucker, is relentless. As soon as it spots Hinako, it will hunt her down with determination and speed. And once it catches up, it will deliver a hailstorm of physical attacks, leaving few opportunities for retaliation. Worst of all is one of its grabbing attacks, where it hops into Hinako's lap and starts licking her face.
That wasn't fun. That's not an experience I'm gonna look back upon with.
Remember the good old days?
Its own face has been ripped off, reflecting how it's only through their actions that a sexual predator will reveal themselves. This world won't wait for Hinako to conform. Some will simply take what they want from her, whether she gives her consent or not. While different in their approach, each and every one of these enemies have a singular message for Hinako. A message of repeated, lifelong pain. Women will bring you pain. Trying to be like a woman will bring you pain. Giving birth will bring you pain. Your friends, your family, the men you allow into your life, or who force themselves into it. Pain, pain, and pain. It's no wonder why the original ending to Silent Hill F sees Hinako trying to heal and bury that pain with more and more of the red pills she received from Shu, to the point that she loses her grasp on reality completely and ends up going on a killing spree at her own wedding. Hinako faces the same enemies in both Ebisugaoka and the Dark Shrine, though the latter could almost be called an enemy in and of itself, the way it provokes Hinako's non-conformant values with religious tradition and imagery. Tradition is all about respecting and sticking to a set of rigid customs and ceremonies, and Hinako, as previously touched upon, isn't exactly fond of the idea of becoming a trad wife. Yet, in the Dark Shrine, following tradition is her only means of survival. For example, one of the weapons Hinako acquires here, the naginata, was used by Japanese women during wartime to uphold the safety and honor of their home. Some women carried this weapon into battle, alongside male soldiers, but it's certainly no coincidence that a weapon associated with the role of a traditional Japanese housewife is featured here. Hinako is defending herself against the enemies of the Dark Shrine, yes, but she's also defending the household of the Fox Mask. The Dark Shrine is his domain, after all. And as thanks, he puts Hinako through more physical pain than those enemies ever could, through religious ceremonies of bodily sacrifice. It's around this point where one would rightfully ask, is Silent Hill F a commentary on female suffering, or does it merely exercise it? What is there to be said through a story about a young woman living in a world, two worlds, where both friends and foes wish her so much mental and physical harm? Art director Box Shi said the following, in a video published on the official Silent Hill YouTube page.
Our goal was to create a kind of emotional dissonance, moments where beauty and unease could coexist. What might appear captivating also exudes a sense of unease, strangeness, or a concealed threat.
What Shi talks about perfectly encapsulates the push and pull of Hinako's internal and external struggles. Tradition and religion both unite and divide. They create security, as well as hostility and alienation. The environments of the Dark Shrine evokes a sense of spiritual awe, but they are also tainted by the presence of hostile creatures, just like the Catholic Church. The red spider lilies around Ebisugaoka bring an aesthetic pleasantness to the village, but they're also lethal in Silent Hill F and real life. Spider lilies are poisonous flowers, commonly associated with Japanese grave sites. So as beautiful as Ebisugaoka may appear by the third act of the game, where it has been mostly consumed by these flowers, it's a sign that the village is dying, or that it's already dead. Though isn't there a beauty in that too? A fresh start? Suffering is all around Hinako, but so is temptation, and it's ultimately up to Hinako to decide if she's going to give in to either.
もう一度だけ言うわね。生はあなたが選びなさい。誰の意見も聞かなくていい。自分の意志だけで選びなさい。
The central theme of Silent Hill F is about loss and reclamation of individual agency. Hinako wants to make her own decisions, but both she and you, the player, are more often than not deprived of that luxury. Hinako is not the driving force of the narrative. The narrative is forcing her along, and it's entirely by design. No matter how many times you replay Silent Hill F, Hinako has no choice but to ritually sacrifice her friends, and every time she refuses to shed a single tear for them. You are supposed to question her behavior, question why you can't change this outcome. Same goes for her transformation to a fox. Women in fiction turning into feral beasts is a common shorthand for maturing, of taking control over their lives, as seen in films like Ginger Snaps or the very subtly named Night Bitch. So when Hinako gets to release her inner fury, one would be right to perceive it at first as an act of liberation, of empowerment. But it's not Hinako's choice to transform. She's being coerced by a man to do it. She transforms because this is the way Fox Mask wants her to be. He gifts her the illusion of individual agency, and there's nothing you can do to prevent it, at least not initially. And what is, in my opinion, the most tragic ending of Silent Hill F Hinako can't decide between staying as Shu's platonic partner and Foxmask's new wife. So she chooses both, though not before the two of them talk over her about who gets to claim ownership. In silent rebellion, Hinako asks them not to talk about her like an object, but receives neither a response nor actual respect. The choice between the two isn't even hers. Not really. The situation is thrust upon her, and the decision is arbitrarily binary. It's two boys trying to make one girl believe that the fate of the world is dependent on which one of them she wants to smooch more. It's juvenile, and fully expected as a tactic of manipulation. Rather than having two mistresses fighting over one man, like Pablo Picasso did, Silent Hill F pits Hinako in an internal fight against herself over two men. And speaking of Picasso, it's very ironic that this ending includes a post-credits scene where Hinako walks into her new home with her new husband, while her sliced-off face screams from the bottom of the temple steps, before being crushed under the sole of someone's foot. In this ending, Hinako really did become a doormat, after all. But what is it that Hinako wants? In one of her first journal entries, she describes herself as a person who needs time before making a decision. She also doesn't want others to make decisions for her. Two sentiments that are completely antithetical to most of what Hinako ends up doing throughout your first, hell, maybe even your second or third playthrough. But that's the thing about Silent Hill F. It doesn't end until you say it does. All subsequent playthroughs, all the different endings, essentially depict Hinako imagining a different path for herself. To unlock these different endings, you have to explore, read new and hidden documents, and solve new puzzles, one of which is real easy to miss. In other words, you have to take your time. This theme is even imbued in the game's combat system. Flailing Hinako's weapon at enemies without thought heightens the risk of both leaving her open to a barrage of incoming attacks and more quickly depleting the weapon's durability. Regular attacks may damage enemies, but they barely cause them to flinch, making it harder to read how close you are to actually taking them down. The optimal solution is to be patient, wait for your cue to perform a counterattack, and execute. To play Silent Hill F quote-unquote correctly is to play it as truthfully to Hinako's own character as possible. Only then will she be able to claim her own agency. And the truth is that Hinako doesn't know what she wants, only that she needs time to figure it out. And the more time you spend on Silent Hill F, the more informed that final decision will be. You will, for example, learn that Hinako's father was a harsh and aggressive patriarch because he was trying to live up to society's expectations of his gender. You will learn that Rinko acts the way she does because she has turned the pursuit of finding a boy into her entire personality, giving in to the pressures Hinako actively tried to avoid. And in such cases where Hinako does submit to the fox mask, is she truly that different from Rinko? Likewise, you'll learn that Sakuko tries to cling to her perceived safety of tradition, striving to become the next priestess for her family's dying temple. Most important of all, though, you will learn that the true identity of the fox mask is none other than Koroyuki, another boy Hinako grew up with. When they were children, Koroyuki was attacked by a fox, and Hinako was the one person there to help him. Legends around the village say that divine foxes have the ability to possess mortal beings, which is what ended up happening to Koroyuki. His coercive behavior towards Hinako was, in actuality, the will of one of these fox gods, speaking through Koroyuki's lips. Does this revelation relieve Koroyuki of any and all accountability? I suppose it kind of does, though that's only if you take it all at face value. On one hand, people can change, dramatically, by no fault of their own. Koroyuki didn't choose to be bitten by the fox, but it inevitably changed him. The lore of the game might dictate that there was absolutely nothing Koroyuki could have done personally to reclaim his agency from the fox. In real life, though, one simply can't blame horrible behavior on personal trauma. You are not your trauma. You are what you make of yourself afterward. On the other hand, Koroyuki has his agency removed by the same divine being that took Hinako's, making them both victims of the same oppressive patriarchal force. two sides of the same coin. One is made to be an abuser, and the other to be abused. There should be no confusion about who's got the shorter end of the stick within this power dynamic, though I appreciate that Silent Hill F takes the time to highlight how all of its characters, regardless of age, gender, or societal status, are affected by its societal norms. When I heard that Ryokishi 07, famous for its dark yet hopefully optimistic depictions of sensitive subject matters, would helm the script for Silent Hill F, this was the stuff I was hoping to see. None of the human characters are straight up evil. No one is a monster. They're all just people who have said and done monstrous things. And they are not immune to learning from their mistakes. Which is exactly what Kodayuki does, as soon as Hinako is able to free him from the spell that binds him to the nefarious fox god. Without the outside influence, Kodayuki actually agrees with Hinako. He is fond of her, but uncertain if a lifelong commitment to each other is the best choice for either of them at this time. And so they go their separate ways, with the intention of finding each other again later in life, whenever, if ever, it feels right to do so. Hinako, meanwhile, is still torn about her future. Literally. The Hinako that walked through Ebisugaoka and the Hinako who walked through the spirit realm now share the same space. One leans more towards an independent path, and the other towards settling down with a romantic partner. One day, one of them will win over the other. But until then, they have all the time in the world to figure it out. In Hinako's own words,
I don't want people to make me happy. I want to choose to be happy. Even if I end up miserable, if it's because of what I choose on my own, then it's all worth it.
And her sister Junko replies,
In another 100 years, no. Perhaps sooner than that. There will come a time when true happiness is choosing your own path, no matter the outcome. I obviously can't live in that world, but I hope you can, Hinako.
Silent Hill F takes place in 1960s Japan. But its subject matter is right here, right now, wherever you are. It's everywhere. All of the time. It's not rare for a mainline Silent Hill game to touch upon contemporary subject matter. Hell, some of the points brought up in this video, especially regarding female agency, could also be applied to Silent Hill 3, or even the original Silent Hill. Silent Hill 3 sees Heather struggling with a forced demonic pregnancy, and the inciting incident of the first game sees Alessa literally splitting her soul in two in order to prevent her mother from using her as the vessel for another demonic birth. What is rare about Silent Hill F is how blatant it is about its political messaging. The short message perhaps being the other exception. It deliberately sidesteps the danger of being misinterpreted by screaming its intentions as loudly and as far as possible. It's a game that is absolutely sick to the stomach of women being used as machines to be fed the suffering of others, of those who turn a blind eye to all their own faults and failures, only to blame women for them. It refuses the idea of women being goddesses or doormats. All it asks is for women to be treated like people. Well, actually, it doesn't ask, it straightforwardly demands it. Though not before subjecting you, the player, to a crushing amount of targeted misogyny. I'm not surprised that some, let's face it, men, found Silent Hill F to be obnoxiously in your face about women having it really hard. Though I am curious about how those players never thought to interrogate why the game is like this. The blatant misogyny of Silent Hill F is there, because that's how blatant it is to anyone who spends every day, every month, every year personally experiencing it. The game makes you feel like you're constantly being talked down to? Congratulations! You've just learned one of the pillars of the female experience. That's not to say that Silent Hill F solely sets out to educate a male demographic. I believe its goals are way more universal than that. Not a single character, male nor female, walks away unscathed by the patriarchal norms of the game's setting. Everyone is miserable. including me. And everyone playing can surely relate to the feeling of having to live up to the expectations of others. It's easy to go through that struggle and end up blaming yourself for being inadequate. That's the so-called manosphere's entire reason for being. Silent Hill F spits on that notion. It shows that blame and suffering is something that you're being fed by systems and norms, and the people who reap the benefits from perpetuating them. Before I even played the game, I read a book called Monsters: What We Do with Great Art Made by Bad People by Claire Dederer. And there was this one chapter that stuck out to me. In it, Dederer references a documentary hosted by Stephen Fry, where he mentions his fantasy of going back in time and pleading to famous German composer Richard Wagner to abandon his nationalistic and anti-Semitic views in order to be remembered as the great composer that he actually was, free of the stain that would later come with his name being associated with the Nazi Party.
Listen, you're on the brink of becoming the greatest artist of the 19th century. And future generations will forget that simply because of this nasty little essay that you're writing and because of the effect it'll have. Unless, I can think, what would he say to that? If he had known that the person who was most hurt by his anti-Semitism was himself.
Are you sure?
Dederer points out that Fry sees himself as being able to educate Wagner. After all, Fry knows better, as if people in the late 1800s weren't capable of the critical thought that we possess today. Truth is, Wagner could have known better, but chose not to. Similarly, one's initial reaction to the gender norms of 1960s Ebisogauka would likely be something along the lines of, well, at least we know better now. I don't believe that to be the purpose of setting the game so far back in time. I believe this time period was very deliberately chosen to highlight just how little things have changed since. Say you had a time machine, and you went back to tell a father figure like Hinako's to stop treating his daughter badly. Say you go back to tell Picasso to stop treating his muses like disposable tools of artistic inspiration. Would that in any way change the fact that we're currently living in an age where women's agency is being stripped away to the point of almost matching the norms of those time periods? Hell, you don't think someone from the 2050s would like to come back to our time to tell us to stop treating trans and queer people as badly as our current world governments are? It's not a problem of ignorance. It's a problem of calculated determination. Hinako essentially gets that moment with her father that Stephen Fry wished he could have with Wagner. A moment of a villain admitting to his misguided ways. Though while Fry would likely have forgiven Wagner, Hinako does not forgive her father. No amount of understanding of why he did the things he did changes that he did them. And while he may ask for forgiveness, he's not entitled to it. No one is. Everything that Hinako goes through in Silent Hill F, all the pain and suffering, all started with her father depriving her of her agency, and by proxy, the player. Women are not machines for suffering. But to paraphrase the late film critic Roger Ebert, art is a machine for empathy. And stepping into Hinako's shoes is excruciating, and above all, frustrating. You fight towards a goal that might not even exist, and the people and creatures you come across along the way don't treat you much better than the dirt they're walking on. Unless you aren't already aware of the game's different outcomes and what they entail. Why even bother putting Hinako through all that suffering? Because perhaps the suffering of trying to change things, as impossible as they may seem, is preferable to the suffering of not being able to.
This was initially supposed to be something leaning a bit more towards a traditional review, but since that didn't really fit with what the video ultimately became, I suppose I'll throw in my overall thoughts on the game here. In short, I really liked Silent Hill F. In my second ever video on this channel, I suggested that saving the series would require it to not isolate itself behind the borders of the titular town, to explore its themes and iconography through different cultures and time periods. And so far, the short message, and now Silent Hill F, have done exactly that. It may look and even feel different from past entries, but the core is still very much intact. I've seen a bunch of criticism being thrown at the combat system, that it's too similar to the Souls games and whatnot. Not only do I disagree with that take, I'd argue it has much more in common with the combat systems of Silent Hill 4 and Homecoming. I haven't seen anyone who has been able to explain what is so inherently bad about that. Either way, I don't find the combat system to be the issue. The issue is the copious amount of times you are forced to use it, especially during the third act. It's thematically fitting that Hinako has to face her demons. Perhaps it's even more fitting that this process eventually becomes tedious. Still, it's the one thing about Silent Hill F that I could have lived without. Other than that though, I think this is another home run for the revival era of the series, and I sincerely hope the developers at Neobards are allowed to continue being a part of it. I also just want to point out that, well, there's no coincidence that we got a game like this and By Sweet Carol, which covers some of the same topics, in the same year. Like there was no coincidence that we got 2 horror films about forced pregnancies, The First Omen and Immaculate, last year. Art always says something about the times it was made. And if the current times are gonna keep looking like this, well, we're certainly gonna be seeing a whole lot more stories like Silent Hill F in the near future. With that out of the way, I want to give a special thanks to all the lovely patrons who make my videos possible. Here are some of them. 12p! Anaday, Callum Wally, Chromatophorium, D.E. Wright, Eben Phantom, Emmeline, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Ava Le Chance, Håvard Krugerud, Icarus Harker, Jesse Earl, Kalis, Labis, Losty, Nicole, Rowan Woodcock, Sable Cow, Sethsard, T.B. Skyen, The Fluff, The Sphere Hunter, Vinders, and Wine Kasra. I also want to thank Delaney of Infinite Snow Productions, and Hamish of Writing on Games for editing the script, Ruby Seals of Codex Entry fame, the Sphere Hunter herself, Susie Hunter, and Delaney again for providing their voices, and Lauftre for the amazing makeup and camera work. 2025 basically became the year of Silent Hill on this channel, and I feel like it's time to cover some different topics for a while. Though rest assured, whenever the next Silent Hill title releases, we will eventually regroup for another trip through the fog. I hope to see you all then. And I mean, also in my first video of 2026, whatever that may end up being.
Do you seriously believe any of that shit matters? Of course not. Have you not been paying attention? The only thing that matters is the canonical UFO ending. Sure, you could argue that the UFO endings from the previous games were there just to be a simple gag. You could say that. Even though you'd be wrong! The UFO ending of Silent Hill F, however, is irrefutably canon, because it's rooted in the game's actual narrative. Early on, it's established that Hinako and Shu had this childhood game they used to play together called Space Wars, where they shared a toy ray gun to protect the Earth from invading space aliens. A timely reflection of a country still recovering from the devastating aftermath of World War II. Lord of the Fireflies? More like, fuck you, I have a laser sword! In New Game Plus, Hinako can uncover ominous radio transmissions and posters pointing at aliens being the cause of everything that's been going on around Ebisugaoka. So when you discover the final item on this quest, you're gifted a 4-minute cutscene where it's revealed that aliens have come to gradually and secretly replace the local population with their own shape-shifting kind. So the main characters agree to reveal awkward truths about each other in order to prove that they are still themselves. Shu is a pervert! And the alternate version of Hinako turns out to be a robot built by Sakuko to detect aliens, but fails to do so because its battery immediately dies. Then Hinako's parents turn up to tell the group that the aliens have been taken care of by the neighborhood watch. But can they be trusted?
Can anyone be trusted? They tell Hinako they're gonna make her favorite dinner, but Hinako points out that it's actually Junko's favorite dinner. Are they shape-shifting aliens? Or just shitty parents? Also, the Shiba dog from previous games is steering the UFO, which was confirmed to actually be Cheryl Mason back in Silent Hill Shattered Memories. Which means that Silent Hill F takes place in the same timeline as the other games, and by extension, their UFO endings. You can't deny it anymore. The Silent Hill UFO endings are all canon. The truth was out there, and I fucking found it.